Hello, and welcome to the Men Human Rights Discord server, the semi-official Discord server of the Men Human Rights subreddit. We are at our Saturday live stream, which we have every week at 1:30 Central, 7:30 UK. I know this is a bit later than usual. Apologies for that. Time zone issues, time zone changes. But we are here, and today's topic is a good one. Because Floody has done it again. Michael Flood, everyone, has yet again made a wonderful little post surrounding his book. For those of you who aren't aware, Professor Michael Flood is a professor and well-known male feminist advocate in Australia. And he wrote a book called Engaging Men and Boys in Violence Prevention. And please do not be deceived by the title. The title has nothing to do with teaching men or boys how to stop violence happening to them. It's to teach them how to mentally blockade apparent tendencies they have to possibly hurt women. And in this one, we're focusing on his most recent post where he has said, and I'm quoting his post, and I'll be putting it in chat, beating the backlash. Here are some key strategies in responding to men's rights / #MRAs. Offer an alternative analysis of male disadvantage, critique and discredit MRAs so they're harmful for men themselves. See page 338 to 343 of my book. The list we're focusing on is on 339, by the way. And of course, he links it to his book. And this list is, first of all, titled Responding to Anti-Feminist Backlash. I think he got something wrong here. MRA does not equal anti-feminist, so might want to double check your facts there, Floody. And he has a nice little list here that he already sort of said in his post, offering alternative analysis of the issues on which anti-feminist men focus. Acknowledge and respond to the areas of male pain and disadvantage. Offer alternative male voices. Critique and discredit organize anti-feminist backlash. Show that anti-feminist efforts are harmful for men themselves. And then he goes more in depth explaining each part with their own paragraphs.
Yeah, I want to draw specific attention to the word discredit, in that he is critique and discredit doesn't sound like somebody who's open to listening at all, which is, to be honest, my opinion of the guy anyway. But what we have here is essentially him saying that they want to, like, this is actually really standard feminist tactics if you look at this list. Acknowledge and respond to areas of male pain and disadvantage is a tactic that they use. But basically they'll say, yeah, we know that men are committing suicide a lot, but then they'll go off on some sort of like tangent where they either draw attention to female suicides and say, yeah, women are trying to kill themselves more, even though we know this is basically a myth. And they will, like this is all about managing dissent rather than actually addressing anything we say, because it's the kind of thing where they'll respond to you saying, like, an MRA will say that men are the majority of all murder victims, and the feminists will go, oh yeah, and who's murdering them? It's that sort of that's the sort of thing that we're dealing with here. if we go through the list, would you like to? Anyone want to read through the list? We're going to have to pick someone, if not me.
Do we hear a volunteer reader in the room?
Say the list. Do you mean like the, aspiring ally for motivation, ally to relationship, the system, stuff like that? Yeah, I'm not seeing a big list.
You're talking about the responding to anti-feminist backlash list, Mom?
Yeah, exactly that one.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got it open, please do read it. I have trouble reading things on this computer.
Thoroughly, I do have the book right here. So it's on the page 339. Yeah, it's table 10.1. So it's about the average Joe, the internalized Joe, the activist Joe. So these are the archetypes of the people that Michael Flood is talking about, and he's talking about the good ones and the bad ones. So on the aspiring ally for motivation, we have average Joe, who is self-interested, selfish. He's only for people I know and love. Then on the internalized Joe, he is altruistic, other I do this for them. Then the activist Joe, he is for social justice, combined selfishness and altruism, we do this for us. Okay. So then on the issue of allies to relationship to the system, we have the average Joe, who is a person not interested in systems, just stopping the bad people. Then we have the internalized Joe, who is the target group, an exception from the system, yet ultimately perpetuates it. Then we have the activism Joe, who seeks to an issue seeks to escape, amend, and/or redeem, redefine the system. Then, when it comes to the issue of privilege, the average Joe doesn't see privilege but wants to maintain status quo. Then, the internalized Joe, he feels guilty about privilege and tries to distance himself from privilege. Then the activism Joe sees illumination of privilege as liberating. Then when it comes to the problem of power, the average Joe, the aware Joe. Yeah, I've been reading it wrong. The aware Joe says, I'm powerful, protective. Then the internalized Joe, empower them, they need our help. And the activism Joe, empower us all. When it comes to the issue of admitting mistakes, the aware Joe says, I don't make mistakes. I'm good and perpetrators are just bad people. The internalized Joe says, difficult, struggles with critique, own issues, highly defensive about behavior. The activism Joe, on the other hand, seeks critique and admits mistakes, has accepted own isms, and seeks help. When it comes to focusing on the work, the aware Joe, it just says the word perpetrators. I don't know if Michael Flood is accusing the aware Joe of being a perpetrator or not. It's kind of ambiguous. The internalized Joe, on the other hand, it says other members of the dominant group. When it comes to the activist Joe, it says my people doesn't separate self from other agents. So that's the list that Michael Flood put out, in which anyone can just understand that Michael Flood believes that the activism Joe is the quote unquote good man, while the aware Joe is seems like a caricature of someone who wants to maintain power at all costs. and doesn't see any problem with their own behavior, which to Michael Flores means, they're patriarchal. And the internalized Joe, it seems like a critique of woke men, which is very interesting. It's really interesting to see a feminist going up against another group of feminists this way, saying to them, you are the internalized Joe, you do understand the issues, yet you're not enough. You're still perpetuating the patriarchy and all. You're not the solution yet. Which is weird, because then if we look at the what it says before that, it says they work and challenge other men rather than focusing on how they're quote unquote different from and better than other men. But how are we supposed to interpret this gigantic list as not Michael Flores putting himself on a pedestal and criticizing other men for falling short and not being enough, and basically creating a gigantic hierarchy in which some men are the good ones and the other men are just like perpetuating the issue constantly. So it's not enough to understand the problem. It's not enough to agree. You have to be like Michael Flores. So I find this to be really interesting.
You could probably do a big in-depth psychological evaluation of this.
Totally.
But I think it actually tallies that he's calling out other male feminists for not being good enough allies, because this is a standard thing that feminists do. And I think it has a lot to do with their mentality that they are the ideal man, essentially, and that all other men fall short. They're the one good man, sort of thing. And the other men are all rapists and cowards, and they hate women and stuff like that. And therefore, in his mind, the ideal state of being is that, basically they fall at the feet of women, and they say, we are not worthy, like the old movie. But it's that is essentially what they're going for there. It's all about virtue signaling. It's all about striving to be the best doormat. I'm the greatest doormat. It's a very frustrating and very cringe-inducing mindset, I think.
This is a pattern that repeats when it comes to all of these people, because they're not allowed to blame women for anything. Therefore, when it comes to anything they want to solve, they have a point A to point B. If they cannot get to point A to point B immediately, then that means that someone needs to get blamed. And they only know how to blame men. So if the only people around them are just feminist men, then they're gonna get the blame. They're not being feminist enough. They're the problem. So this is just blaming men again, which is the status quo. Which is so interesting how feminist men have their own very conservatism way of handling things. They cannot see a way of solving an issue without blaming men and telling men to step up because they're being the problem, So it's they eventually do eat themselves, because that's the only way they see the world,
It's all of this comes from that environment, the really virtue signaling and pedestalizing of women and each other, and gatekeeping the acceptable level of feminist, or I don't know, transformative behavior and attitudes. But going through this article itself and the list, all of it is just very well crafted and very well resourced gaslighting. You know, it presents the case that, you know, in typical gaslighting fashion, that the presenter is blameless and that the one presented to is entirely at fault. No matter how we respond, it will either be some combination of our ignorance and unreasonable hostility toward them, who are of course only trying to do the right thing, to make society overall better. And for others who are trying, either that we're too sensitive or not doing enough, or that we're subconsciously complicit. And like I said, these are gaslighting techniques, and unfortunately, the social media discourse has kind of pathologized gaslighting as, something pathologically wrong with the gaslighter. Okay. Now there may or may not be something pathologically amiss with Michael Flood and company. But the fact of the matter is, these, this isn't an expression of narcissism or psychopathy. This is a means to an end. This is a strategy that has been effective and successful for them for a long time. These people have made millions of dollars and had influence, in the highest halls of power for decades now, just by saying stuff like this. And before we started recording, I was talking about the use of statistics and statistical analysis, in these articles and papers and so forth, is that, they're used in this way, without anything that like guarantees that all of the research and all of the analysis is not simply, a predetermined conclusion in search of the supporting data points. In other words, it's motivated and biased, not by what it does say, but why it avoids even, but because of what it avoids even looking at. And because of that process, they can present this to the average casual reader in a way that makes it very hard to be skeptical, and to say, well, gosh, Mike, if everything you're saying here is true, and these people providing you this backlash are, honestly bad actors and acting in bad faith, why are there so many men dying? Why are there so many men who are, off the grid, in the gutter, suffering? And if the response is, well, because they're not feminist enough and they don't talk about their feelings, and they're not activists on our side, that's why they're so miserable. My response to that's going to be, well, I'll tell you what, say tomorrow you wake up and all of those men that you're criticizing so harshly suddenly decide to start acting the way you believe they should. Have you thought it through carefully enough to be able to guarantee that that's going to make things better? Because there's nothing here in front of me showing that life would be any better for anybody if men suddenly started following the Michael Flood line. Like nothing at all. Right? It just, all it is a lot of complaining, and bad faith accusations, toward people like us, because we're simply, like promoting and presenting a different point of view. That is all.
So I just read something in the book a little bit below that is very illuminating. So it says they move from an othering focus on bad man, to a recognition of how they and other men are implicated in male privilege. So this is coming from, I don't know if anybody notices, but this is coming from a super far left view on the world. The idea that all human beings are like blank slates and there is no bad people, there is just bad systems. So, like, Michael Flood believes that we live in an evil system that is constantly producing like this type of man, the patriarchal man, who is constantly doing the bad things. And he believes that every single man could be turned into one of them at any second. So that's like the point in which he starts the conversation, which is a problem because like they're constantly chasing their own version of the devil, because patriarchy is basically devil a devilish system. So because they have no targets, they're so this patriarchy is so isn't so immaterial. They're constantly switching back and forth between how to attack or how to even approach a subject. And that's one of the reasons why they end up attacking men, even though they say they don't focus on man. They say we don't focus on the sinner, we focus on the sin. But in reality, they have to focus on man because that's the only target they have, because they don't have anything else.
I think it's a lot more like conspiracy theory stuff, racist conspiracy theory stuff about the Jews and stuff. It feels much more like in that sort of line of things, where they've got this big ominous power, and they can fight that power by attacking a particular group of people, and that particular group of people they ascribe as having all of the power in society and all of the ability to move things. I was just having a conversation on Twitter with a woman who thinks exactly that. She's talking about how women have no power to affect society and men have all the power. And this is essentially their byline. This is partly why you'll look in this book and you'll notice that it's not really addressed to women at all. It's all about targeting. Well, you won't find anything about stopping women's violence in this book. I've already looked through it, and I can guarantee you that there is no chapter or anything about women's violence against men. So, and I've spoken to Flood personally, so I do know him, and I know that he doesn't acknowledge women's violence against men, like, at all. He will say, yes, women can be abusive, but it's not anything like as bad as men's violence against women, so we should just ignore it, basically. He doesn't, he steps around the just ignore it, but this is what he implies every time because Flood will basically step around things. He will go for the weakest part of any argument, and he will essentially ignore anything which is a problem with his argument. For example, the Australian courts guidelines, which he is heavily cited in, something like 14 times, which basically says that any man who accuses his female partner of domestic violence should essentially be given the third degree, and they should basically go down this list of gaslighting sort of question and answer.
Hold up. He said that? Michael Flood said that, or is that
Said which part?
that any man who accuses their partner of domestic violence
No.
should be
He's
given
just cited very heavily in this court handbook, which is essentially using his work. It's the official Australian court handbook, essentially, and it cites him
it's
very
the court
heavily.
handbook?
Yeah. I'm
The
surprised nobody knows
actual
about this because I think
court.
we did an episode on it. Yeah.
Wow,
The court handbook says that
the
you
actual
basically. The court's handbook basically says that if you accuse your female partner of domestic abuse, it is tantamount to proof that you're domestically abusing her. That is their stance in it. If she is violent towards you and they can prove it, then that is actually proof that you're violent.
So
This is the sort of stuff that comes out of Flood's work.
What is this argument about, or debate?
Oh, it's not a debate. We're having a live stream about a book written by a famous feminist who I am frenemies with, let's say. So basically, should we go through the list in the book of things that... Sulfur, could you mute your mic when not talking? So basically, should we go through this list of things that he's said as responses to us and critique them?
Sure. Let's go for it. Oh, I lost the
Okay.
handbook.
Have you got the list in front of you?
Do you know what page it's on?
Yeah, I do have them right here in front of me. It's
389, I think.
Yeah, 339. It's responding to anti-feminist backlash. Do you want me to read them?
Yeah.
It's only like 3 bullet points. So it says offer alternative analyses of the issues on which anti-feminist men focus, and then a subsection says acknowledge and respond to areas of male pain and disadvantage, which is interesting. Offer alternative male voices. Then second bullet point, critique and discredit organized anti-feminist backlash. Third bullet point, show that anti-feminist efforts are harmful for men themselves. So those are the responding to anti-feminist backlash bullet points. And then it goes on. I can read what goes next if you guys want to.
Well, we should probably stop and critique those particular points. I mean, I think that to provide alternative
Your mic's bugging.
My mic's bugging out.
Oh no, it's okay. We can listen. We can it's better now. You can keep talking.
Yeah, sorry, it does that. But so basically he's talking about himself. He is the alternate male voice to the MRAs. And he's essentially saying that people like him will deal with men's issues. But if you actually look at his Twitter feed and his books and all this sort of stuff, you won't find one damn thing helping men. You will find a lot of castigation against men. You'll find plenty of stuff that's like trying to help women. But you won't find anything specifically dealing with men's issues except as like a consequence of something he's posted, which is dealing with women's issues. So like if men get included, it's by accident, essentially.
So I think this is basically like they're very afraid of men being helped outside of the feminist paradigm. So they have to quickly get in and try to recruit people away from that, because like they're very afraid of people being helped without the ideology of feminism, you know? Because there's a problem. Like if people don't need, like if men don't need feminism, then maybe women are going to start deciding that they don't need feminism also. They can't have that, because feminism needs to be like an all-encompassing ideology that helps everything and binds everything together. It has to be very absolute and totalitarian, you know?
Well, the thing is that they don't really believe that any of this helps men, and they don't honestly really believe their own points, because if they did, they would actually defend them. Like Michael Flood would sit there and he would defend the Australian guidebook, which cites him thoroughly. It's all about power. It's all about gaining like power for essentially a controlling female elite, though he would never put it like that. He would essentially put it as a redressing the balance. And of course, he thinks that as the good doggy, he is going to be given pets and scritches and essentially be treated very well in this new society he's building, where male victims are the scum of the earth and female victims are, well, women are automatically believed when they accuse men. And it's this very unfair system where everything is lumped on one side. And I think it comes down a lot to men's need to protect and provide for women. And this is, I think, a major reason that he's doing this sort of stuff. He feels like men have to be sacrificed for women's comfort and safety, even if they don't have to be. Like this is essentially he's essentially in like the tribal war mindset where all the men to be sacrificed to keep the women of the tribe safe. And he's he's pushing for this and he's pushing for it, but he doesn't actually have to do this, because this is not really the situation.
Well, the biggest problem is like this is how like feminism takes advantage of very old traditionalist views, because like men were the ones who were sacrificed by the tribe back in the past, and we still have that that expectation, that desire, and men are still bound to that role. But what feminists want to keep in place is a very old status quo of women as human beings and men as human doers. They're the ones that do. Men become humans by their actions. Their actions are what makes them human. So if we actually analyze Michael Flood's entire book by this lens, we can see that Michael Flood wants men to become human by doing feminist activism. That's how men will seek the path to redemption. And I wanted to focus on one weird thing that I just noticed in the book. Michael Flood attacks the fathers' rights movement, which is very weird, and I don't understand, but he has this to say about it. He says, he says, fathers' rights groups do little to increase men's actual share of childcare or positive involvement in parenting, both before and after separation. Indeed, some collude with perpetrators of violence against women and children, protect and advocate for perpetrators, or are perpetrators themselves. So this is very interesting. I've never seen this mask off before. Michael Flood is saying that the fathers' rights movement is focused on violent men getting like custody of children, which is very weird. I've never in my life
Actually, the stance of now, I have. That's the they've deleted it now, but that is actually one of the public stances that now that's National Organisation for Women, a major roadblock for us. That's one of their stances that they've had, at least in the past, is that equal custody is essentially about giving abusers children. Like this is the sort of thing that they say. It's basically victim baiting. What they do is they say, if you do this thing which looks really good on paper, women and children will be hurt, especially women. And that, if you are a normal man, is a huge, oh no, I can't do this. Women will be hurt. And they don't think it through. They don't ask questions because honestly they can't. Because if they do this thing, which is now being publicized as being something that will hurt women, then they are an evil woman abuser. And, you know, we can't have that, even though it's not actually something that hurts women. It's actually something that probably helps women.
True. Well, this is just how feminists have to maintain the status quo. They have to give it a spin, their own spin, you know? Which is a big problem. It's like so women are getting the most amount of custody, so therefore we have to concoct some argument as to why that it's good and why it shouldn't change, because it's all about power to them. Like they actually see children as power. They see if the women are feminists, then we are inculcating like feminists believe on those children. But if the men are not, then we can't allow them to have the children at all. They have to belong to us, you know. And which is weird because like normally you would guess that feminists would be all up in these a critique on the current you know court system and how women are expected to like be in charge of the children, you know, get like automatic custody. They'll be saying that this is a harmful expectation on how women are thought to be default mothers and how we need more 50-50 equality or whatever. But as soon as it has to do with giving a fair share to men, then all of a sudden they throw that out the window. No more equality, no more equity or whatever. It's all about we need to preserve the status quo immediately. And I wanted to focus on something else that I read in the book. This is a very interesting data that Michael Flood actually has on the book that I want to read out. So it says in 1996 to 1997 survey of adults who have been partnered in the last year, 3.4% of men had perpetuated any physical assault against a partner in the last year. Then another point says, in a 2001 survey of young people aged 12 to 20, among young males who have ever had a dating relationship, around 1 in 10 have pushed, grabbed, or shoved a girlfriend, thrown, smashed, kicked, or hit something, or tried to control a girlfriend physically by holding her. Smaller proportions, 2 to 3%, report that they have tried to force a girlfriend to have sex or physically force her to have sex. Then it says in a 2008 study among university students in the Australian sample, 18.4% of males have perpetuated a minor assault on a dating partner in the last year, while 7.9% have perpetuated severe assault. This is very interesting because, like, normally I remember back in the days, like 10 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago, you couldn't get away with hearing a feminist saying that 1 in 3 men were violent assaulters. But now the narrative is changing. They're finding less and less overinflated numbers. Now they're saying that it's just between just 3.4 to 18.4% of men are violent or are, rapists or problematic. So I do see this as a giant victory of how they really can't manipulate data anymore and get away with it. So they can't really keep pushing this idea that 50% of men are like violent thugs, raping all of the women. So I'm glad for that. And he actually concludes all of this by saying there and other studies tell us that in most countries, the majority of men have not participated in violence against women, at least in the bluntest forms. I see this actually as a victory, to be honest.
I've noticed a couple of things there. First and most obvious is, of course, that he doesn't give any stats for women. Like, how many, if we want to go back to Jezebel, Jezebel admits openly that several members of their staff have abused their boyfriends. So it's like, it is something that he should address, but he doesn't address it, probably because from what we've seen, the numbers are going to be equal. Like the abusiveness is going to be equal. Second thing I've noticed, which is much more subtle, that I'm not sure that a lot of people would pick up on, is grabbing your girlfriend to control her, pushing your girlfriend, that sort of stuff. That could mean a lot of different things. So that could be abusive. Let's get that out of the way first of all. That could be very abusive. That could be you shoving her into a wall, saying abusive things to her, and but that could also be you grabbing her like Johnny Depp did to stop her from attacking you. That could be her jumping on you and trying to mash you over the head for a vase or something, and you pushing her off.
Not what he's implying.
It's not what he's implying. What he asked in this, or what whoever did the survey asked in the survey. These feminist surveys, they're always incredibly leading in their questions, like almost always. They will ask extremely loaded questions, and then they will take those answers to those questions and they will use them to buy things that the people taking the questions would never have thought of. And so
one thing I want to say, the same critique you're using for the surveys that he employed is the same critique where he employs for surveys that we use, CDC. He says they lack content, yada yada yada. So you're actually critiquing his surveys, the surveys that he uses, the same he critiques CDC surveys and other studies that we'll have. It's quite ironic.
It's funny you say the CDC, because Mary Koss of the CDC was a great fan of the manipulative study. She's, in our community anyway, quite famous for that survey of, after the fact survey of women, and who it basically boiled down to the women who she was counting as rape.
I know.
Yeah, I'm just saying for other people who might not know. Yeah. But for those who don't know, it's she basically, the people on her survey who she said had been raped didn't consider themselves to have been raped. So you can then take the feminist angle of saying, oh, these women, they've been brainwashed into thinking that they haven't been raped when they have. Or you can look at the actual questions and realize she was asking really, really, really loaded questions.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what was one of the criticisms. For example, with the 1 in 5 rape statistic, women will be raped. Like it was initially college women, but now like they decided to apply it to a national standard. That was also one of the criticisms for the 1 in 5. Apparently, like my understanding about the 1 in 5 statistic, is that it was from an old survey, like a really old survey from the 80s. Then they decided to do an online survey in 2008 where they asked load of questions, or they asked really weird questions, took all the answers from a low response rate, and then said 1 in 5 women will be raped, and put it at that, right? Like it was so unreliable, right? And that's one of the things that fueled a that's one of the things that fueled the like sort of campus rape hysteria at the time. And it was so bad that the authors of the study themselves came out and said it's unreliable.
The campus rape statistics are notorious. They're absolutely terrible. But yeah, it is like the statistics he uses are manipulative in themselves. I think we should probably go through some of the other stuff he's done. I mean, it would be interesting to actually take a look at his webpage on MRAs, because it is hilarious if you actually know what an MRA is and you've like studied up on this. Because according to him, literally any man who does anything to do with, like, who says anything about gender or dating or sex or anything like that is an MRA. Like anyone he doesn't like is essentially an MRA, because like he bundles in pickup artists, he bundles in incels and all this sort of stuff. And it is very, very clear that, I mean, I know he knows what an MRA is, but it's very, very clear that he doesn't want you to know what an MRA is. He wants the term to be smeared, essentially.
Yeah, that's something I've seen that he does, right? That's like pickup artists. Like none of us here tolerate them actually, which is the ironic part. Like none of us. Have never seen a single L advocate that was like, "Hi, MRA, POAs definitely represent me." Like I've never seen anyone like that. Um,
Yeah,
but the worst part about Michael Flood, as I remember, I'm not sure but like he said, he commented on one study where like men were victims, and he said that was like probably a playful slap. So even when
damn.
men are reporting, yeah, I think men are human mind. Like even when men are reporting, say, "Hey, I've been abused," he's like, "Well, that's not enough context to would have been a playful slap."
Oh
Duh.
yeah. They whip out the nuance immediately when the perpetrator is female, which is very
Oh,
suspicious because, like,
tell me about it, right?
yeah, like a normal person would either there are two options. You're either nuanced when it comes to everyone, or you're not nuanced at all. But they're very selective. Sorry, Tarek, you wanted to say something?
Oh,
No,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was answering to Mal. I'm saying no. If
Oh,
I say
okay.
something, ain't nothing pretty coming out of here.
Hmm. Yeah, we get it.
Well, I'll say something not pretty in that he wouldn't like the phrase playful pinch on the ass.
Oh yeah. Well, no St. Patrick's Day for him, you know. I can totally read the men's rights section if you want.
Please do, but it's yeah.
Totally. So okay, so he says we're on page 342, and he says so the actual strategies adopted by men's rights advocates and networks do very little to help men. So that's the number one criticism. Men's rights activists blame, threaten, and harass women and women's organizations rather than offering men support or services. And when they do support, support is in quotes, quote unquote support. And when they do support man, such as separated fathers, they might incite them into misogynist anger, blame, and destructive strategies of litigation and harassment. And
I've had this exact conversation with Flood. He knows that we don't have the money to build basically anything. Like, we don't have the money to do all these fancy shelters and things, and frankly neither would feminism if it wasn't for all their rich donors and all their government funding, which we don't have access to. Like, we want to build shelters, and we've tried to build shelters, but our shelters don't get any money. What our shelters get is harassment. This is actually him committing Darvo. We don't attack women's shelters. We are happy for women's shelters to exist. We're very happy for them to exist. But what we want is shelters and services of our own. And we want government-funded organizations who are obliged by law to cater to both men and women, to cater to both men and women. And if not, then we want equal government organized, funded organizations that cater to men. It doesn't have to be the same organization, but it does have to be an equal effort, let's say. It doesn't even have to be the same sort of services, because men might not need the same sort of services. Everyone likes to forget that Erin Pizzey, saint of the MRA movement, is the person responsible for the shelter movement, which feminists love so much. She started it, they stole it and corrupted it and perverted it and turned it into something which now actually actively attacks men and says that men are essentially all abusers, and that any man who says he's a victim is actually an abuser. Though some have started putting little things on their website saying, if you're a man who has been abused, then here's a helpline for you that isn't associated with us. And that's not active hostility, but it is better than active hostility, at least. And but there are, like, we have an article on our website written by somebody who went through some of these government-funded shelter organizations and looked at some of the absolute nut bar conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat craziness that they have on their websites in full public view. Like all of their crazy ideology stuff. You can find it all archived on our website. I'll give you a link in a second. But they attack men. They attack male victims, and they do so with great fervor. And they've done so for many years. And it is only very recently, like, this section in Michael Flood's book is very telling, because it's essentially them walking back, even though it doesn't look like it. It's them walking back as we advance forward and demonstrate that they actually need to address us. This is what it is. He is saying, okay, we actually need to address this now because it's getting out of hand. And his idea is to essentially corrupt it, to smear us, and to take over from MRAs and then do absolutely nothing, because you'll notice that there's no grand strategy in this book which says, oh, we are going to take on men's issues and we're going to actually do something about it. No. That he's saying acknowledge men's issues and then shuttle them out of the way and bring in alternate men's advocates. These alternate men's advocates are people like him who will talk about nothing but how bad men are and how good women are and how men need to protect women and all this sort of stuff. Because when you get right down to it, feminism is the patriarchy. They are part of the grand cycle where we go from being a promiscuous society to an extremely prudish society and back again over the course of every 80 to 100 years or so. We've seen this time and time again, and it is something you can track across large amounts of time. This sort of we need to protect women, we need to liberate women, we need to protect women, we need to liberate them. This is why feminists are going from slut walks to essentially demanding safe spaces and talking about how private and happy they feel when they wear the burqa. It's this sort of thing. Like, they've exposed themselves, and now they feel exposed, and now they're diving back into cover like scared rabbits, essentially.
Well, like if he begins with the premise that men have all the power, then obviously he's not going to offer any solution because he believes that men are not suffering at all. So yeah, you were going to say something, Starch?
Yeah. So one thing as well is I'm writing a critique on, like, sort of the concept and the phrase and applicability of toxic masculinity, right? And toxic masculinity is essentially the feminist framework for men's issues. Like I'm not gonna pretend to, like, run about. However, the issue with it, so I'll just give you a snippet of what I'm doing. The issue with it, the first issue, is that in like 60 studies, the phrase toxic masculinity has not been defined, right? It has not been defined. Yeah, I know the origins of the term painter. It was mainly from, like, men's lib movements in the 80s, which are then still associated with feminism. So really, you got a conflict of interest, like, right off the bat. But then it got adapted into academia, or, like, feminists adapted into academia. Yeah, by adapted into academia, and the feminist in question who adapted it, had gender dysphoria at the time, so she didn't even know what she was, right? So and a most important part as well, right, is that her research around toxic masculinity was on fucking criminals. It wasn't on normal men. It was criminal men. So the basis of the research attributes criminality to all men, right?
That's so
So
crazy.
it's like I'm going off researching female researching researching about toxic femininity, and I'm going over and I'm researching and I'm looking at fucking female sex offenders. I'd look like a fucking clown, wouldn't I? Right? It's you're going to like male criminals, right, who have their own issues. I don't want to alienate them by saying, oh, well, they're male criminals, well, let's leave them out of this. No. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna alienate a certain group of men for my point. But when you take male criminals, yeah, I'm getting it for you. So when
Yeah.
you take all criminals, then and you put and male criminals, and then you look at them from the length of they do shit because of exaggerated stereotypes of masculinity, then yeah, you're gonna get a flawed term. But let's get back into the meat of the meat of what I'm trying to say, right? The phrase itself is not defined. It suffers from something, according to a professor in New Zealand called Carol Harrington, and she found out that the phrase is not defined in 60 papers, right? And she said, well, the term suffers from something called signal disapproval, which essentially means toxic masculinity is whatever the fuck you want it to be, right? It's not defined. It's not set in stone, right? It's the definition is ever changing. All right. Another thing, if you look at, like, the quote unquote positive masculinity programs, or like the toxic masculinity programs, they do not care about how men benefit themselves. They care about the sexist attitude or the homophobic attitude men have, right? They do not care about, like, positive results in men themselves. They rather care about positive results that men are gonna have responding to women, under the assumption that men are just eternally sexist. So, right, you got this issue that is like toxic masculinity. When people say toxic masculinity, it pisses me off because I've never suffered because of toxic masculinity. I suffered for other reasons, right? And it's not something that is made to help men. It is made to, like they say, it helps men in this backwards way, in the sense that, oh, well, why are all men abusers, or why are all men rapists? Oh, it's because of traditional gender stereotypes of needing to dominate, and yada yada yada, toxic masculinity. Oh, well, men kill themselves because of that. So if we fix these gender stereotypes, we fix male suicide, which is apparently like the only extent of men's issues, and we kill rape and abuse of women. All right, so like they've got an idea of trickle down equality. That's essentially what toxic masculinity is, and that's another criticism of toxic masculinity, is that men don't fucking kill themselves, just because they can't cry, or like they don't wear the color pink, or whatever the fuck. There is several studies and several people have came out and said this, but male suicide is a systemic issue, right? There's a lot of stressors, there's a lot of factors that contribute to a man killing himself. Education, struggles in education are one. Abuse is one of them. Alcoholism, drug abuse, you know, um, and the worst thing that they found as well. I'm gonna get you the studies in a sec. But the worst thing that they found is 80% of men who kill themselves were in contact with a therapist. So it's not that men are not seeking help or trying to be stoic. It's that men are talking, we're just not listening, right? And that's by far the biggest issue with all the whole toxic masculinity shtick. Sorry that I'm going off on a tangent, right, on a long tangent, but
I think
it
it's a good
rather
tangent.
it rather internalizes the issues that men face, like abuse, struggles in work, financial issues, and divorce courts, into themselves, rather than addressing the issue that says, well, how can we provide services that help reduce these stressors, right? But the reason why it's this weird, like, sort of weird framework, is that it's deliberate. They want to minimize men's issues to, like, not being able to cry, or traditional gender stereotypes, in a way that can only help women. You know what I'm saying? If you look at, for instance, the Mankind Initiative, or the Man Box, right? Which is like one example of a toxic masculinity program. They only care about how it could benefit women, right? Because men are sexist pigs, right? It only cares about heteronormative culture, whatever the fuck that means, right? And it stereotypes men as a whole. Like, I'm sorry, I haven't seen a man who is encouraged to dominate through fucking violence. I haven't seen a man who says, "Oh, I'm gonna be a man. I'm gonna go beat a random woman." No, that's straight up stereotype. So I'm gonna show you guys the finished product, but I'm gonna wrap it up for now. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that would be amazing. Dark, do you want to take us out? I can do it too, so we can wrap the podcast up.
Yeah. By the way, it's not a stereotype, it's just sexism.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, sexism
Well,
could be shown through stereotypes, technically, if I'm correct.
Yeah, we can keep talking
Yeah.
about this after without recording because Ma needs
Yeah.
to go now.
Alright.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming to another one of the Men Human Rights live streams. As said before, we are here every Saturday, 1:30 p.m. Central Time, which is 7:30 p.m. UK time. We always love hearing everything you have to say and having you guys on. If you ever have a topic that you want, please feel free to reach out to Men Are Human, to M Painter, to Mao, or myself, and we'll try our best to get it on the stream. But until next week, then, everyone, see you.
You.
Yeah, that was super good. One of our best ones.